The city lights of Boston blurred into streaks of gold and blues. Emma Harrison sat trembling inside her 10-year-old Toyota Corolla parked outside. Harborview Bistro, a restaurant so elegant it felt like a different universe from the life she lived every single day. Snowflakes drifted down like tiny feathers, melting instantly on her windshield as she stared blankly at the time, glowing on her cracked phone screen. She was 52 minutes late to a date she wasn't even sure she deserved. Her 8-year-old son, Liam, had been running a fever all afternoon, and the only reason she had left him was because her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rivera, had finally reluctantly agreed to keep an eye on him after Emma had begged her through tears. The babysitter had canceled last minute because her boyfriend had shown up unexpectedly, and the hospital where Emma worked had called her in for an emergency half-shift, leaving her racing through traffic, praying her car would hold together long enough to get her across the city. She was 34, exhausted, divorced, and juggling motherhood with 12-hour nursing shifts that barely covered rent for the tiny studio apartment she and Liam shared above a noisy convenience store. She had no right to be here, dressed in a simple lavender dress she'd bought from a thrift store clearance bin 3 years ago, her makeup half-worn from stress and rushing. Her best friend Claire was the one who had insisted she go on this blind date, telling her she deserved a moment of joy after years of putting herself last. She'd said the man was good, patient, gentle, someone who wanted something real. But looking at her reflection, now puffy eyes, trembling lip, hair frizzing from the storm outside, Emma felt like a joke, like someone pretending to fit into a world she had never belonged to. She opened her phone to type an apology text, ready to tell the man inside that she simply couldn't make it, when a message popped up on her screen. It was from Claire. "He says he's not in a rush, he's happy to wait. He just wants to make sure you're okay." Emma stared at the words, her throat tightening. She checked the baby monitor app connected to Mrs. Rivera's old tablet, and relief washed over her when she saw Liam curled up, breathing softly, a damp cloth resting on his forehead. She whispered a quiet plea to the universe for strength and wiped her tears with the back of her hand. For a minute she sat there, gripping the steering wheel, shaking from the weight of everything she had been carrying alone. Then, because she needed to believe that maybe something good could still happen for her, she took a deep breath, grabbed her coat, and stepped out into the cold. The wind cut against her as she hurried toward the restaurant, her old boots slipping slightly on the icy sidewalk. When she walked inside, the warmth hit her instantly, along with the subtle notes of violin music and the soft murmur of conversations among people dressed in clothes she could never afford. The hostess glanced at her with thinly veiled judgment, eyes sweeping over her thrifted dress and worn coat, and opened her mouth as if to question whether Emma belonged there. But before she could say anything, a man rose from a corner table near the fireplace. He stood slowly, his expression brightening with unmistakable relief, his eyes gentle and warm. He had dark blonde hair, a well-kept beard, and a calm, steady presence that seemed to fill the room without overpowering it. He walked toward her with a smile that wasn't just polite, it was genuine, the kind that made her feel seen rather than evaluated. "Emma?" he asked softly. And when she nodded, still mortified by her lateness and appearance, he smiled wider. "I'm Noah Bennett. I'm really glad you came." There was no irritation in his voice, no subtle impatience, only kindness. Only understanding. He guided her to the table, pulling out her chair without making a show of it. And when he noticed she was shivering, he gently draped his charcoal gray coat over her shoulders as though it was the most natural thing in the world. The hostess, now suddenly polite, offered them menus, but Noah barely looked at her. His eyes stayed on Emma, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel like nothing outside their table mattered. She apologized immediately, stumbling over her words as she tried to explain the chaos of her evening, the sick child, the sitter canceling, the work call, the car threatening to give up entirely. She kept talking, rambling about how she understood if he wanted to leave, how she wasn't the sort of woman who fit into places like this, how she wasn't glamorous or free or effortless like he probably deserved. But when she finally paused to breathe, expecting him to sigh or excuse himself, Noah simply shook his head. He reached across the table, not grabbing, not taking, just gently placing his hand near hers, giving her the space to choose. When she didn't pull away, he brushed his thumb softly over her knuckles and said, "Emma, you fought through everything tonight and still came. That tells me more about your strength and your heart than showing up on time ever could. You're not someone who gives up easily, even when life tries to break you. That's not a flaw. That's courage." His words hit her like a wave, cracking open something inside her she didn't realize she had been protecting so fiercely. They talked for hours about their childhoods, their struggles, the pieces of themselves they rarely shared with strangers. Noah told her about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to survive, about losing her when he was in college, and how he had built his software company from his tiny dorm room as a tribute to her resilience. He hated the stiff, polished world of business dinners and superficial connections, craving something honest, something real, which is why he had asked Claire to introduce him to someone who didn't pretend to be perfect. Emma told him about Liam, about how she had worked her way through nursing school while caring for a newborn after her ex-husband walked out, choosing a new life that didn't include responsibility. She spoke of long nights in the AA, of moments of heartbreak and moments of profound hope, of wanting to give her son a life better than her own. Noah listened the way people rarely did, fully, quietly, with a softness in his gaze that made her feel safe. When the restaurant closed, he insisted on following her home to make sure her car made it through the snow. And when they reached her building, a worn-down brick place with flickering hallway lights, he didn't judge or hesitate. He simply asked if he could walk her to the door. Before she went inside, he asked gently if he could take her and Liam to the winter festival that weekend, something simple, something warm, something that didn't require her to pretend to be anything she wasn't. Emma felt tears rise again, but this time from gratitude, from relief, from something she had almost forgotten: hope. Over the months that followed, Noah didn't try to rescue her, didn't try to fix her life. Instead, he stood beside her, steady and patient. He grew to love Liam, helping with homework, cheering at school events, fixing things around the apartment that Emma could never afford to get repaired. He respected her work as a nurse, often asking for her perspective on new projects his company was developing for medical software, valuing her experience more than any consultant's advice. And Emma learned to see herself the way Noah saw her, not as someone struggling to stay afloat, but as someone strong, determined, and deeply worthy of love. 2 years later, they married in a small ceremony at Harborview Bistro, the place where she had once walked in believing she wasn't tea enough, and walked out beginning to believe she was. As they danced their first dance with Liam between them, Emma thought back to that snowy night when she had sat in her car, exhausted and convinced she had no right to happiness. And she realized something she wished every struggling heart could know. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin when we show up exactly as we are, tired, imperfect, scared, and trust that the right person will see us, choose us, and love us, not despite our flaws, but because of our truth. Noah hadn't just waited for her that night. He had been waiting for someone like her his whole life, someone real, someone brave, someone worth everything.